Looking to source more vehicles and stay ahead of seasonal slowdowns? Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer now has Offer Accelerator, a flexible add-on that unlocks extra trade-in leads from AutoTrader and KBB.com. Scale your acquisition strategy on your terms. Learn more at b2b.kbb.com.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Thursday, December 11th, 2025. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, automakers push to preserve USMCA as Trump floats bilateral deals. EV registrations did better in October than analysts expected. And Nissan seeks to undercut Tesla with its own self-driving system. Plus, the second and final part of our interview with Ionna CEO Seth Cutler, who says despite the slowdown in new EV sales, the charging problem still needs to be solved.
EV sales are not going to zero next year. We know there's cars coming off lease that's going to open up secondary markets. This market's here to stay, and we know that we can deliver a great product solution.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. President Trump is signaling he may abandon the USMCA trade agreement in favor of separate deals with Mexico and Canada. The pact is up for review by July, with Trump saying it could expire or be renegotiated. Automakers and suppliers are pushing back hard. They warn that splitting the agreement would cost billions and force them to completely overhaul supply chains. The industry has optimized manufacturing around USMCA's three-country framework since it replaced NAFTA. There is one exception. The UAW wants major changes or U.S. withdrawal, demanding stronger job protections and labor standards. Industry experts say companies should prepare for all scenarios. EV registrations fell 14% in October, the first month after the federal tax credit repeal. But the decline was milder than analysts expected. Tesla led the way with an 11% gain compared with a year earlier, to nearly 50,000 registrations. Rivian rose 10%. Traditional automakers struggled. Ford registrations dropped 23% from October 2024, Chevrolet fell 31%, and Hyundai and Kia slid 49% and 56% respectively. According to S&P Global Mobility data, the EV share of the light vehicle market fell to 6.9% in October from 7.6% a year earlier. S&P analyst Tom Libby says the results point to a solid EV consumer base, though the market still faces uncertainty ahead. And Nissan is making its boldest move yet to challenge Tesla in autonomous driving. The Japanese automaker is developing a hands-off, eyes-on system modeled after Tesla's full self-driving with no geographic restrictions. Nissan expects the first vehicles with its AI-powered next-generation Pro Pilot system to initially arrive in Japan and North America. Joining me now to talk about it is our own Urvash Kakaria, who covered the story for us at Automotive News. Urvash, welcome back to Daily Drive.
I'm glad to be back, Kel.
So Urvash, how is this similar or different from Tesla?
Yeah, so Nissan's taking a very similar approach to Tesla, both in what they're trying to achieve and how they get there. So like Tesla, Nissan is trying to develop a end-to-end point autonomous driving system. So it would basically get you from your garage, your residential garage, your home garage, to your office garage. It will drive the full way. That's different from, say, Super Cruise or Blue Cruise from GM and Ford, which are primarily used for highway driving. It's ramp to ramp. Like Tesla's FSD, Nissan's next generation ProPilot system will sort of do the whole thing. Nissan is also following Tesla's strategy on how to get there. So Nissan plans to use, at least initially, cameras and a vision-based system as opposed to LiDAR. There are two reasons for that. One is it's a lot less expensive, which is what Nissan's priority is. Nissan has said that its next generation ProPilot system should be commercialized initially in Japan by early 2028, and they expect it to be about half the cost of Tesla's FSD, which is $8,000 if you buy it upfront. So this would be a $4,000 system. To get there, they're doing two things. One, they're trying to get less expensive hardware, i.e. cameras versus LiDARs, which are more advanced. But they're also essentially partnering with a British company called Wave. Wave has developed this artificial intelligence sort of driving platform, which essentially taps into a neural network, or basically a network of other cars that are also feeding information on how they are navigating day to day. So instead of having rigid rules and millions of lines of code, Wave's AI platform essentially is able to learn how to drive faster and also adapt towards more edge cases. So it's really a more efficient, less cost and labor intensive way of solving the autonomous driving challenge.
So, Urvash, Nissan is in a tough financial situation right now. How does that affect this really ambitious plan?
Absolutely. So, I mean, for Nissan, self-driving is not a priority. They have much bigger fish to fry. For them, coming up with a coherent plan for hybrids in the US is far more important. They're also spending billions of dollars in developing this new body-on-frame flat platform that will support up to 5 vehicles. So, cutting costs, they're in the middle of a $2 billion cost-cutting austerity plan in North America. So cutting costs, bringing new, more competitive product to market, those are the priorities. But what Nissan says is we're working on all that, but at the same time, we also need to solve the autonomy challenge. Several automakers are pushing towards this goal. It's basically going to be a $3 trillion business. And for companies like Nissan, self-driving is more about safety, and it's also more about driver convenience. So anybody who's sort of driven Tesla's FSD will say that it's a lot safer than human driving. Like, it can detect edge cases, it can react faster than humans. So it's, for most intents and purposes, it's safe. It's safer than a human driver. Yes, there are edge cases. And then also, even though you have to still, pay attention, still look ahead, it creates a lot less fatigue than if you were actually physically driving the car. So driver comfort is another reason Nissan and other automakers are pushing for this technology.
Awesome. Urvash, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all those stories at autonews.com. Coming up, the second and final part of our interview with Ionna CEO Seth Cutler. That's next on Daily Drive.
Dealers, are you ready to accelerate your sourcing? Kelley Blue Book Instant Cash Offer introduces Offer Accelerator, the all-new add-on designed to help you unlock more inventory when you need it most. Whether you're facing seasonal dips or planning a big sales campaign, Offer Accelerator gives you access to additional instant cash offer opportunities from AutoTrader and KBB.com. Flexible, scalable, and built to fit your goals. Plus, you only pay for what you get. Power up your campaigns and keep your pipeline strong. Visit b2b.kbb.com to learn more and request a demo today.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. On yesterday's show, we heard the first part of our own Lindsay Van Hully's interview with Ionna CEO Seth Cutler about the charging network's build-out with the backing of 8 major automakers. In this final portion of the interview, they talk about how Cutler is thinking about the company's target market as EV demand softens after the loss of the federal EV tax credit, and why the network is opting not to develop its own charging app.
All of the chargers, I believe you said, are 400 kilowatts. And depending on the size, they range from somewhere around 8 to 14 up to more than 20. And so the idea, what I gathered today is that that's really about making sure that there's enough stations, that as many of them can be pull through for vehicles that might be towing, and trying to make it so that people don't have to wait, and that there's enough available for really that demand for those people who are on the road.
1,000%. It's all about availability, right? In terms of, if stuff is going to go down. Right? I mean, we hear people talk in the industry of our stuff never breaks. Things break. It happens. So we want to make sure we've got redundancy built in there. So it gives us, a day or two for us to get on site and fix things. But really important beyond that is really around how do we make sure that during peak times of utilization, you don't have queuing, right? We road trip all the time. We're a 2 EV family. We have a Tesla, we have a BMW. We just took our Tesla to New York City. Charging is really difficult in New York City. And we sat in queuing in New York City for, I think it was 30 minutes, right? With 2 small kids in the car. It's challenging, right? So you want to make sure you're building larger format locations where possible. It's not always easy, but you do that in a way to bring queuing down even at peak utilization times.
And you've done this in a couple of ways, right? You're actually, sounds like purchasing plots or leasing
Correct.
plots. And you're also buying, old gas stations, for instance, and converting them, or even co-locating, I think, with existing gas stations.
That's right. So, yeah. So again, because we take a driver first mentality, it drives different behaviors, which is, hey, if our outcome we're trying to achieve is larger formats, locations with a great customer experience, how do we solve that? Well, hey, one of the ways we can solve that is by just buying our own land. Cool. Go buy land, right? Some of our locations, we've bought land or done a ground lease of a piece of land, but we only built on half of it to get through power faster or permitting faster, knowing as we build out utilization or see utilization start to fill the site, we'll open the second half of the site or we'll future-proof the location. So, we've got a lot of tools in our tool chest, so to speak, that others haven't done before just because the ethos, the DNA, the way we think about the customer is totally different. And it shows in every way that we build our products.
In what cases does it make sense, to partner with an existing, like a Sheetz gas station, for instance, or versus actually buying or leasing a plot of land and then building from scratch? I think the way you described it today was if you have the land yourself, you have a lot more ability to kind of design it and build it the way that you would build it today from the ground up versus, kind of coming into an existing facility that might already have building constraints or things like that. But there's advantages too, probably speed. I'm guessing you can get up maybe a little bit faster. For sure. I mean, look, Aaron talked today, he was our head of our site acquisition, our partnerships in a lot of parts of the business. He talked today about how, sometimes we can go faster by buying land for sure than we can by, leasing a parking space. But from a permitting standpoint, it takes longer when you want to do a larger format location and you got to go through a planning commission, zoning, et cetera, versus you're partnering with somebody as a secondary use in their parking lot. So we know from a speed standpoint now, the fastest way to market is to do it with partners, but we want to look for high quality partners. This is why we partner with folks like Sheetz and Wawa and Casey's and others, because they've got great locations, they've got great amenities, they've got a great customer base, and we want to help them with our charging fees. So we'll do that where possible. And then where we can, and we can kind of fill in the valley, so to speak, from a time element to get the scale, we'll go in and build our full rechargers as well to complement. But it's really is an overall tapestry of different solutions that we'll put into different cities. So customers will see in any given city we build in, they'll see a mix of different solutions from Ionna. You're doing all of this, obviously, and it's well known. I mean, charging access and availability has been one of the challenges.
That's correct.
The market's also shifted a bit, right? We had up until the end of September, we had tax credits. There were incentives that helped, kind of offset some of the higher EV prices. That's gone away. And so now I think the industry is sort of waiting to see what that demand ultimately settles out to be. How do you think about the importance of building out that charger network? On one hand, demand is less right now as far as the, new EV purchases go, but people also pointed out at some point, there's going to be a lot of off-lease EVs that go back into the used market. And, how do you kind of think about building it out right now, knowing that there's a lot of influx in the market at this point and where that ultimately goes?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been in this space for, I think, 15 years now, which just shows how old I'm getting. The thing is, if you look back 10 years ago, folks were building out charging networks, betting on the come. They were betting that cars were going to get sold, betting the technology was going to be there. The best part about Ionna, and look, we have the advantage of not being the first, right? But being maybe the third or second or third, is that there are cars already. There are great cars on the road right now in market and coming out next year and the year after that have long range, have fast charge rates that are really fantastic vehicles that people want to drive. And so we have a charging issue right now in the United States that has to be solved, and we're solving that. We know EV sales are not going to zero next year. We know there's cars coming off lease that's going to open up secondary markets. And so I think all of that coupled together is it doesn't matter what the growth rate is next year, or even if it goes down a little bit. We know for sure that this market's here to stay, and we know that we can deliver a great product solution today. And I think what I would add to that also is people have built out charge networks already, and people can rely on charging. But not every charger people go to are places people want to be at, right? And I think that's what we're trying to make sure of, is that what we can also do is help build out a quality network that takes away the doubt in folks when they're looking at an EV saying, no, I'll buy an EV because there's an Ionna network coupled with the OEMs. It makes sense to go do this now.
There were a couple of percentages shared today about success of first charger attempts as well as total uptime. Mm-hmm. What are those, and how do you look at those in kind of context of where you want to be? And is that a sign that reliability is where you want it at this point?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a lot of numbers thrown out today, both on bay counts and everything else. So I want to try to remember every number that we put out there. But I think that the big thing for us is we look at two important quality metrics for charging today. One is uptime, and the other one is, as you've heard today, first attempt success. From an uptime perspective, we really do look at it differently today. And I think in the world of EV in the last few years, is this concept of NEVI uptime, et cetera. We look at uptime actually different than NEVI from the perspective of if an asset isn't performing to a customer the way it should be, we put it down and we affect our uptime. So what we don't want to ever do is have a customer show up to a site that we say is up, that they don't get the experience they're looking for. And we had one yesterday, in fact, where someone posted, hey, the credit card reader isn't working. We missed it in our diagnostics. It happens. We're doing an after action review to understand why we weren't alerted first. We took that charger offline within 30 seconds of seeing it come into our system. A truck was rolled. They were on site within 6 hours. They replaced the credit card reader. The charger's back online. So it's that type of mentality that we're trying to drive into the organization to ensure that, again, it's about building trust with our brand. So when someone hears the word Ionna, what they think about is it works. I don't have to worry about it. And that's a totally different approach. I think that's what's been in the market before.
And you kind of look at this through a whole diagnostics team then that can alert when these things happen. You have crews that are near all of these chargers, whether employees or contractors, who can then go out and make those repairs.
Exactly. And it's really, you think about it, it's really around how do we get alerted? How do we monitor? How do we alert and then diagnose? And then how do we fix? We've built our own alerting platform, proprietary to our company, that pulls in a lot of different disparate pieces of data, not just from the charger, but other assets that are on site, and even working with the car companies to understand what's going on. And we use that to be able to alert us and actually start to tell us what might be going on versus us trying to go through logs and as I call it, read the matrix, understand what to go do. And so we use it to quickly make decisions. And then we always bias towards action. So we're typically dispatching crews on site prior to knowing what to go dispatch parts with. And we'll try to, what we call, kind of set a med kit of parts out there that they can pick out which one. Because at the end of the day, our operations team is focused on get the charger up and running as fast as possible. That's how they're measured. That's what they're working towards. And it drives a different behavior because of that.
You talked a lot today about Ionna speed.
Yeah.
And there's obviously the speed to get those chargers back up and running. There's also the speed to deploy them and install them. And I think some of the automakers today talked about, we push Seth, we push Ionna, we want them to go fast. And,
yes.
and they push us to go fast on the technology side. Because they have those automakers as investors, there's a lot, I'm guessing, of that kind of dialogue. I don't believe the investment amount has been shared, but I understand that all of the automakers are equal partners in the company.
Yep.
How do you, I guess, take that feedback, when you have those kinds of discussions? I know there's a board that meets periodically. What are those conversations like? It sounds very collaborative.
Yeah, I think it's collaborative, and I think there's healthy friction in terms of, for sure the OEMs are pushing us. How much faster can you go? How can you get these chargers up and running faster? Can you get more sites? We're pushing on them as well to say, how do we get more integrated into your dealerships? How do we make sure we're working with you and your customers and the integration of technology side? So I think this is the healthy friction you need. Heat really forms things, and that's what we're doing together. And I think you heard it today about, the collaboration has been really successful to date. Someone said, hey, they would have thought, and I've heard this before in the past, 8 car companies coming together to run a startup. Nobody would have thought that Ionna could have done what it did. And then really that's the testament to the people on the board from the OEMs that they provided. It's a testament, not to me, but the team and the culture that we've built here in terms of the folks here are mission driven, right? And so really it becomes a collaboration of working with the car companies to say, here's the support that we need, right? And then us saying, we're going to go execute now. And that's what you're seeing as a result of that.
And obviously the resources of their investment have obviously helped Ionna get up and running
1,000%,
and started. Yeah.
1,000%.
When you look at how you're deploying some of these stations, you talked a lot about efficiency and trying to run lean. There's obviously a path to profitability that takes time. I'm guessing you're still new. How do you know when you get to that point? It sounds like there's a roadmap to that. You see a path to profitability ultimately.
Absolutely. From early on when we built this company, 3 things that mattered to me. One was, how do we get the profitability when we started to staff up? Two was, how do you ensure quality at scale? And the third one was, how do you go fast, right? Those are really kind of the 3 things that we've been focused on. And I think a lot of that comes down to just being very intentional and deliberate of everything that we invest time and money on, and being laser focused. And so there's definitely a path that we're working towards on profitability. It does take time, but it's definitely core to what we're trying to build here.
When you look at that, what are kind of the things that you do when you focus on efficiency, or you try to be lean? How does that approach kind of guide, the overall, idea and launch and deployment of these stations?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, it's easy to get what we call the shiny object syndrome, right? Everybody wants to work on different things. It's just human nature, right? We kind of, there was discussion today around, hey, why doesn't Ionna have an app? And it kind of shook people both internally and externally around how could you launch a charge network without a mobile app? And it would have been easy to kind of start the company and say, all right, first thing we do is develop an app because that's what you do, right? And I think when we said, no, we're not doing that, sometimes the power to say no is way more powerful than the power to say yes. And so we've been really focused on, hey, is it going to benefit the driver? And is it going to deliver quality at scale? If it's not going to do that, don't work on it. And that's a hard thing for people to digest. But honestly, that's why we've been able to do what we've been able to do. There's only I think we're up to 85 people that work here, right? And you think about 4,000 bays contract, you think about 3,000 bays in permitting, you think about 1,200 bays or beyond the construction in 22 months, right? This office we opened in January of this year. This office didn't exist. We started this company out of a temporary office in Torrance. Then we moved to a temporary office in Raleigh, and now we're here. I mean, these were the things that were going on, literally building the car, as they say, while you were trying to drive it. So it's only possible if you're very deliberate in how you run the organization.
There are ways to do that, obviously, in demand, in pricing, in how you get people in. But there's also, and I think you kind of pointed this out from kind of a long-term perspective, you have land that you've acquired or lease that you haven't fully built out on.
Correct.
And you sort of hinted that there might be things coming down the line where we can maybe lease it to a retail provider, or there's ways that we can generate revenue from this land, it's from almost like a real estate kind of thing. And I wonder how you think about that long term. Is that path isn't just about the charging sessions and the customers and the prices that you set and things like that, but there are other ways that you're looking at this down the road.
Yeah, look, from early on when we started the company and we brought on some of the key folks that you met today, there was very much an intentional desire to want to own land, 100%. And I think this is really a real estate play at the end of the day, honestly. This is about how do you make sure that you can deliver quality charging like we talked about, and then drive traffic to particular locations. And if you do that, the value becomes the location themselves more than anything else. And so that's why right now it's like we kind of know we have a longer time horizon on this wave strategy multi-generationally of what it is we want to accomplish and achieve. But we know that in order to get there, there's certain things that have to be true first. And so we know what has to be true first is we have to get our first 1,000 bays open to the public so we can actually deliver quality at scale. And then we have to deepen the technological integration with the OEMs and talk about the discounts and the other things that are going to happen. And then what's right on beyond that on the horizon is I think there's something else here in terms of the business model and how we really monetize this platform that we're really starting to build on.
And that sounds longer than that 2030 initial horizon.
Absolutely. I mean, look, as the CEO, you can imagine day one, I was trying to figure out how to pay payroll and set up a website. I mean, there's a lot of funny stories in there, but every month, right, or every year that we move to the next wave of our strategy, I'm moving up in elevation in terms of what we're thinking about. But for sure, probably the first week that I was here, it was kind of like, hey, what's our 10-year vision? We know the 5-year vision is 30,000. What comes after that? And we've got some ideas of what that looks like, quite honestly, and we're working towards that. But really, what you got to make sure is you can't spend the entire time thinking about 10 years out. A lot of companies do that. You got to think about what's the here and now and be very deliberate on how to drive execution.
To that end, I guess, you've talked about 26 being kind of the next wave. There were some stay tuned discussions today about things that might be coming. But what can you tell us, I guess, about just what might be next in that kind of near-term horizon then as you're working on building out the network and deepening that technology, adding new things like the plug and charge technology that people were talking about? What does come next and what kinds of things do you hope to be able to roll out or bring new?
Yeah, I mean, for us, that's why it's so important to get the first part of the network scaled this year, what we call the skeletal structure by the end of the year. And by doing that, it gives you this initial base platform to build upon from a technical integration standpoint. Sure, we've got plug and charge with, I think it's 7 OEMs today, going to 9 by the end of next year, maybe even earlier than that, which is a really impressive stat when you think about a company that's been around for 22 months. And sure, we've got integration with several different mobile apps, not just the OEMs, but also with roaming partners, et cetera. But there's deeper technical integrations you can start to do to provide additional benefits to drivers, whether it's discounts or programs or other things that we're looking at right now that'll be announced next year. And I think as we then build out more scale and build out more of the network and finish our phase 1 build at the end of next year, which will only be less than 3 years at that point, then you can start to do a lot more with the OEMs in terms of being able to provide them a network that they can rely on and trust.
And this is open even beyond just, there's the 8 founding OEMs,
Correct.
But really you've designed it to be open to any EV driver from any brand.
It's 100%. And, I'm really proud of what the team has done, right? That we were able to announce with Ford back, I think it's been 2 weeks now. We announced plug and charge with Ford. We announced with Rivian plug and charge and integration to their head units about a month ago. So the 8 for sure is a very deep technical integration, but this is an open network for all drivers. We're trying to solve charging in North America, and that goes way beyond just the 8 investors.
Seth, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer, as well as our own John Irwin, Lawrence Iliff, and Urvash Kakaria for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on electrification, tariffs and trade, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back tomorrow for a conversation with Jeremy Stevens of Bozard Ford about his mobile service 20 Group.
You could keep one van busy just doing recalls. Plus you eliminate that customer going into your dealership and taking up a valuable bay that you could be doing a bigger job and a job that pays more.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.